Hi there, in this video I want to take just a moment to talk a little bit about beyond the numbers 2.12 and how to identify the population. So in the notes what you saw was whenever we identify the population, that is going to be the group or people that the researcher is interested in looking at. So the first question that I had added to this exercise was I asked you, okay, what is the population of interest? In other words, what population are the researchers interested in learning about? So let's look at the first sentence of the prompt. It says, Gallup interviews U.S. adults age 18 and older living in all 50 states in the District of Columbia using a dual frame design. All right, so right there we get the group that Gallup is interviewing, the group they're interested in. And again, that's U.S. adults age 18 and older living in all 50 states in the District of Columbia. That whole thing is the population. And you really, and for the correct answer, if you only said U.S. adults, I took that as well. And so notice here, when identifying the population, we want to be very specific, and let's talk about why. So again, notice that Gallup is interested in U.S. adults age 18 or older living in all 50 states in the District of Columbia. So why would it be incorrect to only say that the population is adults? Notice that Gallup is not interviewing anyone from outside of the United States. They are not interested in learning about people outside of the United States. So if we only said adults are our population, that would mean that adults living in China or India or any other country will be part of the population, but that's not correct. And actually, to say U.S. adults is a population, that's a very much smaller group than if we just say adults in general. So that's why it's important that we're specific and we say that our population of interest here is U.S. adults. Why would it be incorrect, for example, to say people in the United States? Again, this isn't specific enough. Notice that Gallup is not interviewing anyone under the age of 18. So that's why it's important that we say it's U.S. adults, over the age of 18. But if you just said U.S. adults, that's fine. We want to be as specific as possible to really convey what the group is they're interested in learning about. So if you only said adults or if you said U.S. citizens, these are both incorrect for those reasons. Now, the other thing this exercise was designed to do was to kind of help distinguish the idea between the population of interest and the actual population that's being addressed. Whenever we talk about the population, that is the population of interest. So if I just ask you for what is the population, that really is what is the group or people that the researcher is interested in learning about. Unfortunately, being able to sample from that entire population is sometimes very difficult. So in this particular example, you looked at a telephone survey. Telephone surveys are a really common way to sample people and to survey them. The problem with that is that people that don't have a telephone have no way of being in that sample or ever being surveyed. So even though the population that they're interested in is all U.S. all U.S. adults, those adults without telephones never get a chance to be sampled. And so that's why the population being addressed here is actually all those U.S. adults that have a telephone. And so that's the difference between those two. Generically, when we talk about population, we are only talking about what they're interested in, but it is important to note that sometimes that entire population doesn't get an opportunity to be in the sample, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on and the problems that can cause. So whenever you identify the population, it's very important to be as specific as possible. And the same thing goes with the statistic. And so this particular exercise doesn't have a statistic in it, but let's say that they had interviewed 100 adults and they found that 63% of them plan on voting in the next upcoming election. That if I ask you what is the statistic in this case, and you told me 63%, I would say that that is wrong. The statistic in this case is the 63% of those U.S. adults that were sampled that plan on voting in the next election. That whole sentence is the statistic. So when we describe the statistic, again, we have to be specific. We have to say what the value is. We need to say what that value represents and who that value came from, in other words, the sample. So anytime we're identifying any of these things, really, the population, the sample, the statistic, or the parameter, we need to be as specific as possible. And so I think a lot of times when students go through these worksheets, they go a little, you guys go just a little too quick and you read this and you say, oh, okay, they're interested in adults, I'm going to put that down. Well, it's really, like I said, that's not correct. You want to take your time and be as specific as possible when identifying these. Make sure the population really is the, just the group that they're interested in learning about. Make sure when you write out the statistic, you write out, the value, what that value represents, and who it comes from. So you want to be very specific in these answers, and don't think there's always a generic answer for each of these. You really do want to make sure that, you ask specifically or say specifically who they're interested in learning about. And then as always, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. That's what I'm here for, is to help you all, and use that discussion board.